What is up, party people? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jamila. This is JemilaBeReadin, because I do be reading. And today we are going to be talking about Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. This has had a lot of discourse online, and I was already planning on reading this book. I had actually pre-ordered it, so I was gonna read it no matter what, but I definitely bumped it up my TBR just because everyone was talking about it, and I love to discourse, and I also wanted an opinion. So here I am. I kind of wanted to do a standalone review. This is not going to be as long as some of my other standalone reviews that I've done, mainly because I don't really have notes. I don't really know exactly what it is I want to say. I mainly just wanted to come on here and yap, freestyle about my thoughts on this book. And I mean, I typically freestyle a lot of my review videos, but I at least have notes. Here I have some random tabs, and a lot of it's just going to be like my feelings about this book and my experience reading it, as well as the discourse. So sorry if it's a little bit all over the place. It is going to be a little bit shorter. Hopefully, y'all know I love to yap, but we're gonna talk about this. So if you're unfamiliar with what this book is about, it is following our main character, Alice Law, who is a PhD student studying magic at Cambridge. This is set vaguely in the 80s. We're not told this explicitly. There's a little bit of context clues sprinkled in. That's actually one of my critiques that we'll get to later about the setting and world building, but we're set at Cambridge somewhere in the 80s, following Alice. At the start of this book, she is trying to figure out how to get to hell to go save her advisor, because she accidentally kills him. And this is not a spoiler. This is in the flap of the book, the blurb. She accidentally kills her professor, and now she needs to go and save him, partially due to the guilt, but also partially because she needs him to write her a recommendation letter so that she can have the amazing, glowing career that she has envisioned for herself. Along with her comes Peter. He is a bit of her academic rival slash once upon a time friend, who is also the advisee of this advisor. I'm kind of forgetting his name. So they both end up taking a little jaunt to hell, and we just watch them traverse the many layers of hell, trying to find their advisor. On the way, they get caught up into some dangerous situations. They are dealing with their own relationship with each other, and ultimately they, do things. that I felt like that was alluding to something. It wasn't. I didn't know how to end that off without spoiling the book, so sorry about that. This was, R.F. Kuang has a lot of interesting ideas. I think the one thing about her, she has an idea. She has very interesting ideas. Now, I want to talk a little bit about my own reading experience with R.F. Kuang. I read almost all of her books. Now, the only book that I have not read is Babel. I actually got about 20 to 30% of the way through, but I was reading it in ebook format, and there's a lot of footnotes in that book, and the way that it was formatted, I would have to click a hyperlink and it would take me to the end of the book, and then I have to come back, and it was really annoying me. So I just decided I need to read this book in physical format, but then I never got around to finishing the book, and that was 2 years ago now. So I haven't finished Babel. I do plan on it eventually. I'm not rushing to do so. It is what it is. My first books that I read from her is the Poppy War trilogy, which I really, really enjoyed. I still think that's her best work to this day. I read Yellowface, which I enjoyed, but was not my favorite. And finally, Katabasis, which I think is my least favorite of her works. Now, she tends to inspire a lot of discourse online. It seems like there are a lot of people who hate her. There's a lot of people who love her. I tend to see mostly defense of R.F. Kuang, which makes for a little bit of a one-sided discourse experience, because I'm only ever seeing the defense and I'm never seeing the critique, so it almost just feels like people are defending her unnecessarily. I know that's just because my experience is very siloed online. Not to say that she's not receiving criticism. I do think she is, and I do think some of the criticism that she receives is valid. Some of it I think are just people annoyed to see a woman of color thriving, you know. But others, it's interesting. I also read a profile on her, I think it was by the New Yorker, that came out shortly before this book released. And I thought that was such a fascinating window into R.F. Kuang's mind, and really just explained a lot of things for me about her writing. I'll link it in the description if you want to go read it, but I was like, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense to me. In any case, as I mentioned, this is my least favorite of her books. I don't know what to rate this, to be honest. I frankly had a very miserable experience reading this book, but at the same time, it's by no means the worst thing I've ever read. So I don't really know where to land on a rating, so I'm just gonna keep it unrated. But obviously I'm going to talk about my thoughts on this book, so that should hopefully give you some idea to how I'm feeling. I would say that I mostly had a miserable experience reading this because I have also gone through grad school and higher ed, and I had a miserable experience there, and I just feel like there wasn't enough hate for academia in this book for me. I know there's a lot of people who are defending this book and saying it's a critique on academia, it's a critique on being a woman of color in academia, and I just don't know that that actually is what this book is trying to do. It is certainly critiquing the workload, the misogyny and stuff like that of academia for sure. The critique is there. Do we really go anywhere with the critique? I don't personally think so, at least not well. But there's a lot of other things that I thought were not there. Interestingly, race seems to be not present at all in this book, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I just feel like ultimately, if I had to give like a quick one-sentence review, I think that this was an interesting idea, an ambitious idea that fell flat. So let's talk about it. I want to start off with the writing. It was a little inconsistent for me. And there was a specific sentence style that was repeated so much throughout this book that I started to like highlight it every time it happened. Let me get you an example. It was a terrible, gruesome accident that killed Professor Jacob Grimes, and from a certain point of view, it was her fault. And so for reasons of both moral obligation and self-interest, for without Professor Grimes, she had no committee chair. Rest of the sentence. The for is used so much where it'll be like blah 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 blah, for I did this, or for this was the thing. It happened so many times, and at one point that sentence style happened 5 times within the span of a page and a half, and I was like, I cannot stand this. I really do think that this could have used a little bit more like line editing. I mean, it could have used some developmental editing too, but like the line editing, I was surprised. I know like once authors become like kind of big, there's less editing happening. And on top of that, it just seems like there's a whole editing issue within publishing right now anyways. But I was really surprised by how, what is the word I'm trying to use? Hey, editing me here, ignore how extremely oily I seem to be. The word that I'm looking for is unpolished. What I was trying to say is that I was surprised by how unpolished the writing felt. But that sentence structure happened over and over again. There was also a sentence that really stuck out to me because R.F. Kuang uses nope as a verb, like nope out. And I was like, this is really... that really took me out of it. Like, I know a lot of people complain about anachronisms in fantasy stories, and to an extent I get it. It does bother me too, but it is something I'm able to just kind of like gloss over. But that really stood out to me and like took me out of the story because I'm like, wait, are you using nope as a verb? Like, that just feels so right now. And this is supposed to be set in the 80s. The writing is just trying to be like a little bit purple prosy. It's trying to be philosophical. It's trying to be sophisticated. And then suddenly it's like, she noped out. And I'm like, wait, this is really weird. So writing wise, it was a little bit inconsistent. Plot wise, you know, what was this book trying to do? Like, you know, we talked about, I briefly mentioned how this book is supposed to be a criticism of academia, of higher education. And it's like I can see that there. Like I can feel that is supposed to be there. But I think it just failed at it. I think that R.F. Kuang personally has a lot of love for Cambridge and Oxford. She's definitely within academia right now. I think she likes academia a lot. And while you can criticize the things that you love, it just, for me personally, I just feel like there was not enough criticism. And again, that comes down to me and my own miserable experiences in grad school, law school in particular. And I was telling some of my friends that I had a law school stress dream for the first time in years while I was reading this book. This just triggered something in me about grad school, and it just reminded me of the worst time in my life, to be quite frank. And there was not a level of catharsis that I would hope out of this book, and how it feels like a lot of its fans are presenting this book to be. If you're looking for critique of academia, if you're looking for a catharsis in this book, I just don't think that you're gonna find that, especially if you were harmed by academia. Now, I was on Threads while I was reading this book, and I had made a post asking people to explain to me, like, what about this book really worked for them? And I thought there was a lot of interesting answers. And I do think that this is a book where your mileage is gonna vary. Obviously, I'm having a very personal and specific reaction to this book. Obviously, there's a lot of people who like this book, so it's up to you to decide where you land on it, if you want to read it, etc. But there was some people who said that they really saw themselves in Alice, that they appreciated that there was like this critique of academia without like tearing it down all the way. And I get that. But I am of the variety of people that's like, fuck academia, let's bring this shit down. So this just was never, I think, going to work for me. Alice and Peter just reminded me of the worst people I knew in law school, who were just so competitive in a nasty way, who just cared about optics. And obviously they really smart people for sure, but I just feel like there was not a lot of character growth or character development ultimately at the end of this book to justify their unlikability, I suppose. And let me say too, I am someone that can enjoy a book that has unlikable characters. I mention this all the time. I have some of my favorite books have really unlikable characters where I am just like, I don't know what the hell you're doing, but the book just came together well. I think there's just so much that I didn't like about this in terms of plot, setting, world building, pace. And then on top of that, you have these two deeply unlikable characters that again reminded me of the worst people I knew in law school. And by the end of it, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm going to spoil a little bit here right now. So spoiler warning right now. Spoiler warning. At the end of this, Alice and Peter ultimately decide, academia, this is just too tough. There's just so many terrible things about it. And I think that they decide that it's not for them. I actually don't know. It kind of has a little bit of an open ending. I think we're supposed to read it as them realizing that they didn't care enough about magic, as a topic, that they're in it for the wrong reasons or something like that. I don't know if they're going to continue studying and just have a more chill attitude about it or what. It has kind of like a loosey-goosey ending. And I don't know that they really reconciled with like the shittiness that they've brought into other people and to each other. I don't know. I just did not feel satisfied with their character arc. Alice is a little bit, has a lot of like internalized misogyny about women, about herself as a woman and her place in academia, that I don't think really has a resolution, and she says and thinks a lot of negative thing about other women and how she doesn't want to associate with women who are feminists. And she also experiences, you know, attempted sexual assault from her advisor in this book. And I don't know. I just don't know that I really appreciated how it was handled. And I just don't know. I guess I don't understand where she landed at this at the end. I don't know. They both kind of seem like they remained the same people at the end of this book. The only thing is that they realize that, you know, they don't care enough to continue experiencing the harms of academia at the end of it. But all of their thoughts and morals and ethics seem the same to me at the end of this. Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. They're very static characters, and it just seems like they were ultimately rewarded at the end, and I didn't like that, I guess I'll just say. Going now to plot and world building. This is a very, very like relaxed small magic system where the magic, it actually kind of reminds me of Full Metal Alchemist and the alchemy that they do. So their magic comes from, well, like they have to use chalk to draw like these like circles and pentagrams, alchemical symbols and things in order for the magic to work. And there's a lot of like math and logic involved. The math went over my head. Listen, I'm not a math girl. I'm not a math girl. But I was reading, I was like kind of buddy reading this with a few people on a Discord server that I'm in. Some people who are very much math people, and they were like, the math was not mathing. And I was like, hey, I don't know nothing about that. But if you say that's what the case, then all right. Apparently the math wasn't mathing. There was also like some of the mythology and stuff wasn't particularly accurate. That again went over my head. Listen, I'm not a classics girl. I haven't read Nietzsche. I haven't read Dante's Inferno. I haven't read a lot of the things that were mentioned in here, and I'm okay with that. All right, that doesn't make me any less intelligent than I am. Okay, what I will say is that there is a lot of like philosophical musings that happen in this book as they're traversing hell. And none of it actually serves to move the story forward. In fact, there are a lot of moments where it seems to halt the plot so that they can kind of have their little philosophical musings to talk about Nietzsche and whomever and whatever. And they'll just do this for pages on end, and then they'll move forward again. I mean, really what it is they're walking. They're philosophical musing. Then suddenly something happens. They get themselves in a dangerous situation that gets resolved entirely too easily and too quickly, very conveniently, and then they go back to their walking and philosophical musings. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm not gonna hold you. It was boring. It was boring as fuck. And if you are fixing your damn fingers right now to tell me I just didn't get it and I'm not smart enough, like I said, I'm an intelligent bitch, and there's nothing you can say to tell me otherwise, okay? So I found it to be boring. Nothing was happening. It wasn't helping the story move forward. It wasn't particularly helping the world building move forward. How the chalk works, why it had to be chalk, IDK. Listen, I like magical realism. I like lightly speculative work. Not everything needs to be explained to me, but it's clear that she's trying to explain a lot, but all of it is kind of nonsensical to me. I don't really understand how any of this is working. I'm just going along with it at this point. And like I said, absolutely miserable reading experience. The middle bits of this book were just so boring. It was just really boring. There was one character that I did enjoy who showed up in the middle of this book. I'm blanking on her name. But I really enjoyed her. She was the only person with sense in this book. Truly, I wish the book was about her. Let's see, what else? Like I said, the middle half was so incredibly boring to me. It was very mind-numbing. I feel like I would read for hours, and I'm like, only 30 pages have gone by. It's so sad because I love this cover. Look at this. The idea is just so interesting to me, and I just felt like somehow R.F. Kuang decided to do the most boring, uninspired version of this story. There's a lot of critique about R.F. Kuang and how she tends to respond to criticisms like within the next book, or she kind of self-inserts and is addressing criticisms within her book. And I really felt that in this one, because I think one of the biggest criticisms I see of R.F. Kuang is that she doesn't really handle class very well, or doesn't really address class. And this felt like it was mostly about class to me. Not done particularly well, but that seemed to be more of the focus. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there was interestingly such a lack of discussion about race. So I had assumed that Alice was Asian, and that's because there's a trailer that R.F. Kuang put out, her publisher put out, that was like a little book trailer, and they cast an Asian woman as Alice. Most of her main characters are of Chinese descent, so I just assumed. But as I was reading this book, I was like, wait a minute, is she? There's actually no mention of race. It wasn't until maybe like a third to maybe halfway of the book we get a little bit of a hint in that Alice mentions her mother watching Chinese dramas. And then there's one other context clue later on at the end of this book. But it almost doesn't even factor at all. Alice could have been white and it would not have mattered. She could have been any race and it wouldn't matter, because that's how little race seemed to have been brought up in this book, which again I just find interesting, because I think in the discourse, a lot of people defending this book are like mentioning the fact that this is a critique of academia from a woman of color's perspective, and yet race is absent in this story completely. It's mostly focused on class. Again, like I said, I don't think it's done particularly well. And it also is focusing on gender, like misogyny, again, as I mentioned in the spoiler section, but I don't think it was handled particularly well either. And I just found that to be really interesting. I just find that I see the larger, big picture, general critique of academia, in that there's a lot of abuse of grad students. They're put into positions where they shouldn't be. They're overworked. They're underpaid. I see that very general, broad, big picture critique here. But anything going down into more micro specific levels is just absent or not well done. I don't know if that was on purpose. I don't know if she was intentionally trying not to talk about those things. I don't know. I'm just saying it's not there. Ultimately, I just didn't like this book. I had a miserable experience reading it. Again, by far not the worst thing I've ever read. I don't know if I recommend this. I honestly think this is just something that you have to decide if you want to read or not read. I don't feel strongly either way about telling you whether or not you should read this book or not. I just wanted to chat a little bit about this book, because there's just been so many interesting discourse, people raving, people ranting, and I feel like I don't like this book, but I don't feel like so strongly negative against it either. So I just kind of wanted to come in and give maybe somewhat of a middle of the road review of this book. Have you read this book? If you have, let me know. Let's discuss it in the comments. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, what worked for you, what didn't, how it fares compared to other Kuang books that you've read. And I will catch y'all in the next video.